Welcome to Babblecom 5. First of all, let me give you a spoiler warning because certain things are probably going to slip out in the course of doing this video. If you're not wishing to be spoiled for the entirety of Babylon 5, stop now, go somewhere else, just go. Okay. So, when I was watching and reviewing and synopsizing The Coming of Shadows, which is episode 9 of season 2 of Babylon 5, I recalled that I had a script book for that particular episode, which I've had for many years because I'm a first one in Babylon 5 terms. I was there from the beginning, and I followed along as the plot developed. And for some strange reason, I had this book. I say this book, I mean this book right here, sat on my shelf for many a long year, and I never actually read it. And this is a book of two halves. The first half is written by J. Michael Straczynski, who created Babylon 5, and it offers some insights into his thinking behind the series. This was written, I think he wrote it about season 4, so he was quite a way in, and he'd done a lot of what he set out to do by that point. So it's quite a nice time to be reading his thoughts, basically. Now, the second half of this book is actually the script for The Coming of Shadows. And as with the whole of the book, I just have generally never got around to reading it. And obviously, as I'm doing these videos, I thought this would be a very good time to actually make use of it, as it's been sat on my shelves for so long. So I managed to locate it in amongst all my relatively unpacked books. And I have now done what I said I was going to do, I think, in the synopsis video, and I've actually sat down and watched the episode again with this script book. And what I thought it might be interesting to do is just outline to you what the differences are. Now, I'm not going to do that in minute detail because I noticed that for whatever reason, presumably the way in which actors tend to read from scripts, sometimes they tweak little things here and there. So it isn't they don't do the script absolutely word for word. I suspect, apart from the elements that they're told they really have to do word for word. But some elements definitely did get dropped along the way, and I just thought I'd try and pull some of these out for you, just so you can see how it might have gone had JMS not made certain sort of directorial decisions about what was going to be in and what was going to be out of the episode, because I think it is quite interesting. I haven't looked at these in great detail because I've literally just done this exercise, and as you can see, I've marked up quite thoroughly where I thought there were changes, or mainly additions, really. So in the first scene with the Emperor, apparently he was going to be asleep originally, or give the appearance of being asleep, I think to emphasise to us just how tired and how old and frail he was, but that got cut out. But I'm guessing for speed as much as anything else. The next note that I have is that again there's another little piece of dialogue from the Emperor which isn't in there, which says, "Thank you for taking care of all this again while I sail beyond the sunset one last time." And I guess that's kind of foreshadowing of the fact that he's not going to make it, and he kind of knows that when he's going out. So he's doing this one last act out of his own choice rather than anything else. So we move into Act 1. That was sort of the setting up of the episode sequence, and we move into Act 1. And there's a segment where Reefer is giving Londo his speech that has been pre-prepared for him, and Londo says to Veer that ask him whether or not this makes him uncomfortable, and Veer says yes it does, and Londo says then for once we have something in common. But then in the episode it stops there, but in the script it then goes on to say, "I am an old man, what is lost by trying, as the humans say, who dares wins." And then Veer says, "Who dares sometimes gets his head cut off and stuck on a pike." Now that's foreshadowing. If you know the series, that's a big piece of foreshadowing. That's quite an interesting comment coming from Veer. But that was omitted. That's not in the episode. So that's quite good fun. what else have I got? Yeah, now this is really interesting. There's a sequence here where there's a sort of description of the jump point sequence where various Centauri warships come in. But this little section of the act is not, this scene as a whole is not in the episode. And it says interior down below. And I love reading the descriptions of how the scenes are set up in the scripts. It's really interesting. It says the Ranger waits. It's a disreputable area, shadowed and isolated. He fits right in. Then we hear footsteps. He straightens as a figure in dark, cowled robe approaches. With a subtle move, a long, thin-bladed knife slides out of his sleeve and into his hand. He doesn't bare it, doesn't make a threatening move, only waits. The figure stops in front of him, pulls back the cowl. It's Delenn. The Ranger relaxes slightly at the sight. Did you bring it? He hands her a data crystal. The message you were waiting for. I'm to tell you, it's from an old friend. What about the weapons? It is difficult, but I believe I can get you what you need. So that's really interesting. That's not in the episode. We only learn at the end that he's seen her. Right at the end of the episode, we learn that he's seen her and pass her a data crystal. So that sets that up. You know, sort of. I can see why they omitted it, because it's a nice little touch at the end, because we don't know that it's coming. So I quite enjoy the fact that that wasn't in, but that's very interesting. And it would have given us more of an insight into the Ranger, so perhaps they didn't want to fill out the Ranger quite so much, and make clear that that's the person who he was going to see, and who he mentions to Garibaldi at the end of the episode. So it makes perfect sense that got dropped in the context of what's the rest of the stuff that's in the episode. So there's a little bit here about the Centauri Emperor coming on board, and Garibaldi says to Sheridan that he's in, the bay is secure, and Sheridan says, "Initiate pomp and circumstance, Commander." and then Centauri anthem music starts playing as he comes into the arrivals area. So that's quite funny. But again, not vital, so probably dropped for time, I guess. And then there's an element when the Emperor comes in where he talks to Franklin about seeing a Vorlon, and it's only between him and Franklin, but here Sheridan has a piece to say as well, where he says that, well, with any luck, Ambassador Koch will attend the reception along with the other ambassadors. And the Emperor says, but you're not sure. And Sheridan says, with Koch it's hard to be sure about much of anything. So that's quite interesting, because I really thought that was just confined to Franklin, given what happens later. But obviously Sheridan had a little bit to say about Koch there as well. So that's, a little, not vital again, but it's an interesting little addition that could have been. There was also a little introductory element to the part where Sheridan goes to see the Emperor in the sanctuary, where Sheridan talks to the guards and the Emperor's telepath, who apparently were waiting outside the room, which makes perfect sense. They would be, because they wouldn't just leave him in there by himself unguarded. So, but again, that was dropped for whatever reason. What else? There's also a little paragraph from the Emperor just at the end of that scene as well, where he would have been saying to Sheridan, "I look forward to seeing you at the reception tonight, Captain. I think you will see something most extraordinary." And I think that actually makes more sense now, because Sheridan refers to the fact that the Emperor is going to be making an important speech, but I'm not sure the Emperor actually mentions that to him in the episode, in the conversation that they have. So if that had been in there, that would have teed that up. Let me just flick on. Okay. Now this is a very, very interesting one. Tiny little thing, and I don't think I've missed anything else here, but there are quite a few instructions for the dream montage that Londo has before the attack on Quadrant 14, and one of these got dropped, and the description just says, "and we see slitted eyes seemingly peering out of nowhere in the darkness." Now, that's got to be a reference to the way in which the shadows are often portrayed when they're sort of becoming active. But that's obviously been omitted because we don't see that until a lot later. I recognise the description because I've seen the whole series, but that would have been quite mysterious at the time. But obviously JMS probably decided to save that one for later, I think. So that's a nice little omission in a sense, because he kept that one in his back pocket. There's a sequence at Quadrant 14 where the Centauri cruisers have jumped in after the event, and the Narn fighters go and try and do some damage to them, which is hopeless. And there's a little piece of dialogue here between two Narn fighters where they say, "Sir, we're outnumbered, we don't have a chance." And then the other fighter says, "Then we die with honour." So the Narn do have a certain degree of sort of Klingon-esque honour ritual about them, because I remember that there's a scene where the guy who Sheridan, I think it's the guy who Sheridan rescues from the Strive ship, when he draws his blade, he can't put it away without it having drawn blood. So he draws his own blood before he puts it away. And I think that's that sort of honour concept there. Yeah, so that's interesting. So when Garibaldi starts playing Sinclair's message in his office, Sinclair explains to him that his job on the Minbari homeworld is more than just representing Earth. But that element of his speech is expanded on here. And he says, "There's a great darkness coming, Michael. Some of the Minbari have been waiting for it a long time, preparing for it. Others don't believe it. They still think we're the enemy. We're not. And we have to get past that, or the darkness will overwhelm us all. So we're taking steps to change that." Now, we don't really know exactly what is going on with Sinclair and the Rangers at this point, but that's obviously foreshadowing that he knows he's got to forge an alliance. They've all got to forge a better alliance than they currently have in order to go up against the Shadows. So in the context of the coming of Shadows, that makes perfect sense, but I don't think JMS wanted to give that much away, so obviously some of that got cut. So in the Medlab scene where the Emperor passes, there is apparently an argument between Franklin and Reefer about whether or not Reefer should actually be speaking to the Emperor at all. Where Franklin is basically saying this is completely inappropriate, he's in no condition to, and Reefer says he is the Emperor and the good of our people comes first. If he could, he would tell you so himself. This cannot wait. And so Reefer then goes on to tell him about the attack on Quadrant 14, and of course we know what that then leads to. Now, there's quite a chunky scene here, which I'll give to you. This is towards the end of the episode as a whole, and it's inside the observation dome. And so what I tend to refer to as Scene C, but it's called the observation dome here. And one of us says the Centauri vessels are heading for the jump gate, taking the Emperor home. And Sheridan says Godspeed. And one of us says, "Did you notify Earth Central about the declaration of war?" Sheridan nodding. "They're obviously concerned, but they know it takes time to build up a full-scale interstellar war. Both sides have to assign ships, develop strategies, create supply lines. I think we'll have some border skirmishes for the next few months before it builds to total war. With luck, we can negotiate this out before it reaches that stage." And one of us says, "I don't know. This time the Centauri have outside help, and for all we know, they could be ready for total war now." It's an interesting point because, as I mentioned in my more recent episode videos up until sort of episode 12, we haven't really seen that much of the war by that point. So that is about a month on before things seem to be getting sort of warmer, shall we say. But we don't know at that point, I think, to what extent the Shadows have actually been involved kind of day to day, or whether they've just been held in Londo's back pocket. Not quite sure on that one. But it's an interesting one because then Sheridan says, "Leave it to you to find the black cloud behind every silver lining, Commander." And Ivanov says, "That's my job, sir." So that's quite that would have been quite an entertaining little aside and very very Ivanova-esque. There's also another cut here where Rifa and Londo are discussing events, and Londo mentions the declaration of war, but that's not in the episode. And Rifa responds to him that this threat has only put our new emperor more squarely on our side. If the Narns want a war, we will give it to them, and then some. So that's omitted. I don't know if that's for time. I'm not sure, but maybe it's for time. Those are the only major sort of changes that I've noticed. I think the odd sentence gets turned around, the odd word put in or omitted, and I guess that's within the actor's discretion. You know, that whilst they're sticking largely to the script for the really important phrases, if it's more day-to-day stuff, then they'll sort of put in whatever characterization they feel they wish to. That's the back cover of the book, by the way. And this, of course, is the Hugo Award-winning. This is the Hugo Award-winning script that's in here, in effect. Unfortunately, I have looked for you, but as this is a book circa 1998, it doesn't actually seem to currently be in print, even at Amazon. So I'm sure you could find it second-hand if you hunted for it. They might re-release it because of the HBO re-release. I don't know, but bit of a shame if they don't. I think JMS has done some more of the scripts somewhere. I think you can buy more scripts, but I don't know if it's in exactly this format and with his foreword, which is interesting in and of itself. But anyway, I'm pleased that I finally got round to reading it and actually sort of doing this for you. So now you should have an idea of what else you might have seen had all of the script gone into the episode. And if you do manage to get hold of it and you are interested in script writing, I think it's quite interesting as well, because as I say, this has got all of the sort of directions and the scene setting elements in it as well, which I guess you wouldn't necessarily be aware of otherwise unless you were actually looking at a script for the episode. And you can see how pretty much everything that's asked for in here turns up in the episode in terms of the direction and sort of warships passing overhead, and it's really interesting to try and read it at the same time as you're watching it. Obviously, it helps if you know the episode already, so you're not having to constantly look at the screen. I was more listening than anything else, just to see what was in here as against what wasn't. But yeah, it's really really interesting exercise. So I hope that's been of interest. I think it's one of those really pivotal episodes of Babylon 5. So if you are a fan of the series, then I'm sure this book would have been of interest to you at the time. So it's a Channel 4 book, so I'm actually wondering, this may only have come out of the United Kingdom. It's possible. I'm sure it would have been available in the States, but I think it was largely aimed at the UK audience, who were very supportive of the show and quite loud about it as well. Sometimes we Brits can be quite loud about things, and I think we genuinely did help to keep the series going to a certain extent, because there were a lot of shenanigans with when it was being broadcast in the US and on which channels and in which slots. But I guess overseas sales are worth something to these companies, and if they can demonstrate there's an overseas market for it, then they'll probably keep making it anyway. So I'll leave it there. It's a Friday night. I'm going to do something else. So thanks for watching. Keep watching the channel, please. I will try and keep up my steady pace with the episode reviews, and ultimately I hope I will have every episode and my thoughts on them up on the channel. So thanks very much, and I'll catch you next one.